Great.
Good. Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. So I'll call to order today's meeting. Bill Lesage back.
James Horan back.
Deputy City Manager.
Jenny Nolan, Budget Manager.
Tyson Harburg, Budget and Financial Analyst.
Kevin Ingles, Finance Manager.
Rita Russell, City Council.
Steve Lord, City Council.
Evan Van Hornau Mondo, BAC.
And Laura Cooper, back.
And online.
Sean or Peter?
I was waiting for Peter, but Sean Lewis, City Manager.
Peter had to step away. Peter Eckel is also on, just showing for the same for the record from the back. All right. So do we have a motion to approve the June meeting minutes?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you. Second. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? All right. Okay, so we have kind of a jam-packed session today. So first and foremost, we want to welcome Laura Cooper, who's our new alternate member. So thank you for joining, and we're all here happy to help support you if you have questions offline or anything like that. We're happy to help support you. So I joined in like July 2. I think, did you too?
We
Yeah.
joined at the same
It's
time.
a good time because actually going in and then seeing like the presentation that we give to council and stuff, you kind of start getting a feel for things. So it's a pretty good time to join. But we're all here to support you.
Yeah, thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome.
And next up, so we need to elect a chair and vice chair, and I'll take support for how to go through this process. So I am termed out from a chair perspective. So I think we need a motion for both chair and vice chair, right? And then a second.
So I met with Peter on Friday to work on our portion of the report, and I can tell you that he is very interested in serving as the chair. He's currently the vice chair, so I'd like to place his name in nomination.
No, I'll second that. Peter, were you going to say something? I saw you come up your thing.
No, I was just going to thank James, and yes, I would be honored to do it.
All in favor of Peter Eckel becoming the chair going forward?
Aye.
Right. Any opposed? All right. So Peter, it's all you now. I'm going to step out now.
Wonderful. If you can run this meeting, Bill, I'll be forever grateful.
Okay. Do we have a nomination for vice chair?
So I've offered in the past, and I will offer again. I'm willing to serve as vice chair.
Okay. Yeah.
If people are
And I
interested.
know Peter Ritten, had nominated you, and I also will
Yep.
second the nomination for vice chair. Is anybody else interested? Okay. All in favor of James Horan becoming our vice chair?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So I think we're all set.
Wonderful.
All right. So then I think next is just going through our report, right?
Yep.
All right. So thank you. I want to thank everybody. I know folks have been busy from popping in a few times into the dock up through, I know today, folks have been digging in, and I will try to present here. Wonder if they can see that online. Do I need to join the, I bet I need to join the,
No, your screen should be shared.
oh, okay,
It's
sure.
shared right
Yeah,
now.
it's on here then.
Okay. Okay. Here, I can probably make this a little bit bigger. Just missed that. Can you see online okay, Peter? All right. If anybody can't see online, let me know. So again, thanks everybody for jumping in and filling this out. I think we're heading into pretty good shape. Jenny, I don't have your meeting up, but I think it was the 29th. You need the final?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's next Monday. So we want to finalize it this week and get it over to Jenny so they can get it into the docket for the council agenda on the, which would be August 5th. So this piece here we'll remove. That's just kind of our template, our instructions to keep us sane. And folks, you don't necessarily have to put your name here, but it would be, I guess it would be helpful, I guess it would be helpful to put your name here because so we know who can present at council. And then you could do your section. If there's not everybody there, we can split it up. But hopefully a few more folks can join other than just me.
I'm hoping to attend. I'm waiting until we finalize what date my brother-in-law will be in town.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's important. Okay, cool. So if you can attend and present in person, that's great. Of course, you can always join online and listen in as well. So it's usually pretty good. There's usually a couple questions that come up or comments, but it's always a pretty good discussion. And we're usually at the top of the agenda, I think, closer to the top. So you don't have to necessarily stay there the whole evening. So yes, if you can attend, please throw your name down. And Laura, even if not presenting, it's good to listen in or be there if you can. It is worthwhile. So I think we'll jump into it. So we'll update this stuff with all the new changes. We're keeping Suzanne's name on here as she has helped participate. It's weird not having her in the meeting today.
It is.
So my thought was we could just, I don't know if everybody needs to necessarily read their sections, but kind of, I don't know, do we want to read them and see if there's any changes or if people wanted to highlight anything? I haven't had a chance to go through it, I'll be honest. Everybody else's sections, so.
So I can start us off, Bill, if that
Okay.
works, since I
Yeah.
did the introduction piece and I
Sounds
largely used my template from last year. And I'll go ahead and fill in the couple X's there with our new officers. But the question that I wanted to bring to the committee's attention is in that second paragraph there, about midway through. I said also of note, for the first time ever, the BAC reviewed the audited expenditures presented by the Public Works Department and the Inglewood Police Department in association with the sales and use tax measures approved by voters in 2022. The reason I wanted to highlight that is because I thought that was of note since it was our first year we did that. But I'm wondering if we need a section in our report where we not only note that we reviewed it, but perhaps characterize what our findings were, for want of a better word, because we are in fact charged by the voters, by the language of the ballot measure, to do that as I think citizen committee is the language.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We didn't think about that when we were kind of coming up with topics. So, yeah.
To that point, I was debating, since I was heading up the section on the sales and use tax, which both of those, of course, fall under. I was debating whether it was worthwhile to include like a stanza in that, about that, or whether it should really be its own section. But as I was writing that, I had kind of a similar thought that we should put in some commentary to that effect, or at minimum just an overview of the process that we went through. I think that bears inclusion somewhere in this report, potentially in that section, potentially not. I also think wherever we put it, it would be nice if here in the introduction, after we mention, right, that this is the first time that we've done that, just a sentence or so alluding to information about that process can be found in this section of this report or something.
And also in the minutes of the, what was that, the May meeting?
I think that was the June meeting, yeah.
So I can reference that. But I think there does need to be a characterization of our discussion. And in my introduction, I try to avoid that. I'm just kind of doing a historical recount of the year that was.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's a really good call.
Do we think that should be its own section? Do we think that is something I should incorporate into the sales and use tax section?
Jump down to your section here.
Yeah, and we may, I don't know if we want to jump around. We could look through that section now.
Yeah. it seems to make sense to go in there. I mean, since we're already talking, I mean, that is the,
I guess I would almost lean a little bit, and it's largely semantics, but having a small section right after sales and use, since it's associated.
Sure.
But I do think it notes a distinct section, or deserves a distinct section, since it is a voter mandate that we are fulfilling.
I think that makes sense to me, and you know, we may not want to have as full of a discussion of sales and use each year, but we are certainly gonna want to at least include something to the effect of our work in that, on that topic. So I think making it its own section makes sense to me.
yeah, that does. Because we've really done the same thing with the SIP stuff. In some form or another, we've continued to kind of reference it. I think, and we especially did the first and I think second year that we did it. So that's a good call out.
And I do reference that process as well in the introduction.
Yeah. And so yeah, I think that makes sense.
And I also like the idea of having it right after sales and use. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, that sounds good. Were one of you going to do that, or I mean, I can also put something together.
If needed to, I can write it. I'd love any feedback on like what specifically beyond process would be helpful to include there. I know like I don't know how much we want to include. I think like you know, speaking to the template that Jenny made us and that the staff worked on, and how those were really helpful in that. I think that would be that would make sense, but I don't. If there are other details that we should include, I'm certainly open and would appreciate any feedback on that.
I guess from my recollection of that conversation, there were no major concerns that arose.
Yeah.
Is how I would characterize that, but
Yeah.
that there were a number of questions and suggestions around process.
Yeah.
And I think there were a number of those suggestions and requests that were directed at the department heads for both, I think in particular, the police department. We seem to have a lot of questions around FTE allocation and that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So I'd be comfortable with that kind of a characterization. I don't think we need to kind of be, you know, line by lining it or anything like that.
And I think I'd kind of characterize that as just the expectation or request for communication and language that would further clarify those how those aspects were dedicated uses of those funds.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think it was, I agree, and there was no major concerns, you know, from a pass-fail perspective, you know, it passed, and, you know, we're continuing to educate ourselves, because it's certainly a lower level of detail than that we've talked through before, you know, so there's certainly the education part. Yeah, that's a good catch. That it's a big deal.
For that section, as far as the title,
it wasn't called audit, was it? What did you call it up here, James? Because we could probably just use the same terminology.
Well, I pulled Jenny's language actually from the agenda, and
It's
it was
tax measure
review of
review.
audited expenses,
Yeah.
I believe,
Yeah,
is the term.
that probably just makes sense to keep that. Then it's consistent with the intro and with agendas and all that stuff.
should
We could put in parentheses sales and use tax, or sales, you know, we could add sales and use tax as part of that, but.
or maybe even a call out to the 2022 ballot measure or something like that might be more recognizable to constituents, like maybe 2022 tax measure. I don't want it to be outrageously long, but like 2022 tax measure audited expense. I don't know.
Well, it'd be the 2023, right?
Well,
Measure was pulled, but it was, we just want to be clear that we were looking at 2023.
right.
Right.
And I had the 2022 date as at the date the
I guess-
voters
yeah.
approved the measures.
We
Yeah.
don't really need the year, so if, as far as trying to shorten the title, maybe,
Yeah, right, the audited
Tax-
expenditures.
tax measure, audited expenditure.
Yeah, I think that's sales and use tax audited expenditures, maybe.
Maybe some sort of reference that citizen, or city council appointed the BAC
Yeah, that's
as
a
the
good
citizen
point,
committee.
just to get that.
Maybe-
And that was in
context
December of 2022.
Maybe council appointed
Yeah.
audited expenditure review? Is that, I don't know.
Yeah, and James has in here too that the city council, I think, has kind of called us out to do it.
I don't think I explicitly,
Oh, I thought you
Did
said
that,
like city
no.
committee. or
I
something.
mentioned city council in the context of some other things.
But especially as we kind of grapple with the name, I think after, in the introduction, calling out that the specific section will refer more to that might be helpful, just so that the constituents know what we're talking about. Because I don't know if,
Yeah,
like, when I think tax audit, I'm probably thinking that that's like maybe part of the budget auditing process, which like I don't want the constituents to get confused.
yeah, I think a brief 1 or 2 liner makes sense in the intro.
Like the citizen committee,
Yeah,
sales and use tax,
yeah,
increase
Yep.
as approved by voters 2022 or something like that.
yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, that's a really good call out. Well, if you can use any help with that or just want us to review it, I'm happy to jump in or.
I think I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I will take as much help as I can get, especially in this first round, writing this report. I'm happy to throw something together, but
Sure.
especially if people are willing to
Yeah.
look over it, add to it,
Yeah.
I'd very much appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and I think in years past too, we've all been pretty good about reviewing and throwing in comments and stuff, and we still got, a few days to do that, but this should get out the bulk of it. Okay, was there anything else you wanted to kind of highlight from the intro?
Not really. Like I said, I largely templated it
Yeah.
from last year
Yeah, I like it all.
for some continuity.
The history and stuff is good. All right. Oh, and yeah, I see your comment here, syncing up on, because I think, what do I have, an IT network or something down here? So yeah, I can sync up that terminology.
I don't really have a huge preference. I just think as much consistency as we can have
Yeah.
in calling out the titles is.
No, that makes sense. It makes sense to spell out the acronym. I like it.
I think I'm kind of old school in that regard.
Yeah,
I know a lot of my colleagues don't do that anymore.
No, I still try to as well, or catch myself when I don't, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, it's a good catch. Right, so I went ahead and made that update. And I can double check too to see if I'll leave that open and then I'll double check to see if I have it in any other places.
And I was kind of just using that as an example, like if we adapt any of the titles, I'd like to see those reflected here as well, including the inclusion of the new section that we just talked about. I'll add that into the bullet.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right, okay, so reserve policies?
Yeah, and I will say too, I kind of broke it apart. Also, I know this is a little wordy too, so I'm happy to cut back. I also, the background information and that is in the beginning, but I highlighted anything that was like a potential committee recommendation. And I'm certainly not set on these recommendations. If folks want to discuss those or make alterations, I'm certainly open to that. But I wanted to highlight those sections just to make sure that I wasn't putting opinions out there, recommendations out there that the rest of the folks on this committee didn't agree with.
And that's what you have here in yellow, right? I'm kind of.
Yep, and I did the same thing in the sales and use section as well, just kind of highlighting anything where I did make a recommendation. I did try to base those recommendations for, especially in the sales and use section, on things that we've talked about as a committee, but here I did break out based off of some of the discussions that this committee has had in the past. I know the reserve policy, especially in 2022, was when this committee and the council, of course, were really discussing the reserve policy and the intricacies a lot more closely. And so I did make the recommendation that we look for a specific percentage that we could adjust based off of those criteria now that we have the ratcheting and sliding system in place. And if that's not an opinion shared by other committee members, we can certainly take it out of here. It is my personal opinion, but I'm certainly open to removing that and other recommendations that I included in that section.
So these
And
are.
Nevin,
Go ahead, Peter.
I was just gonna say, I have a little catch up to do, but I also will I'm happy to proofread through those too. And I did some work last year on alternative funding and some other things that are sort of loosely tied to both sales and use, and also reserve policy. So I'll let you know if I have any comments or questions too.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that effect, you know, I did one of the recommendations that I did put in there was just you know, considering any in respect to those other funding opportunities, considering any adverse impacts that sales tax specifically may have on different aspects of our community.
Great.
So these four are basically the options you're thinking of, right?
Or
Or that all four of these would be kind of the recommendation?
yes, at least the recommendation is the consideration of these four.
Okay, gotcha.
And if there's a clear way that we can word that, I'm also definitely open to that as well.
Just reading through it. So the recommendation would be to not necessarily change the percentage, but take into consideration
So
what other places are doing.
So currently we have the ratcheting and sliding mechanism in place, but we maintained a reserve of around 16.7 even after we got that mechanism. And so the recommendation is more to consider how we might use that ratcheting and sliding mechanism to adjust, and what an appropriate adjustment formula might be, and maybe establishing a specific percentage by which to adjust it, or a formula by which the specific percentage of adjustment is created, and requesting staff and council's assistance in those considerations. And as those considerations are being developed, a few points that maybe this committee might want to emphasize as part of those council and staff considerations are maintaining the current range of unrestricted reserve values, i.e. not changing beyond not changing outside of the 12% or the 21.4% minimum and maximum values. The rates of adjustment, like how are, to your point, how are other localities that have this range or a range adjusting their mechanisms? The viability of using just the relative, since we have this separate reserve that's a relatively small amount, maybe just ratcheting up or down by the amount of that relatively small reserve and see whether that seems like a slightly arbitrary but maybe viable way of adjusting that mechanism. And also just emphasizing that we're not looking for massive year-to-year adjustments.
Yeah, that's really good.
And again, if there's other values or considerations that committee members would like for us to include, or if there's disagreement among the ones that I did include, or even the recommendation to start exploring how to really use this rationing mechanism that we've put in place as a tool, I'm open to those critiques.
I'd be curious to, not to put you on the spot, but what the council members think might be most helpful in that area.
Actually, I think he needs to weigh in. That's, it's his
Yeah,
policy.
it's kind of my baby. I think the place where council has struggled the most is the question of when we adjust. When do we ratchet? When do we slide? And what is the formula that we apply for that so that future councils know what to expect and the residents know what to expect? And we've never really been able to land on a target number. Every year, what we have ended up doing in the past is taking a look at how much we have in the unassigned fund balance at the end of the year and allocating a sizable chunk of that to capital. I think in the last cycle, Jenny, you'll have to refresh my memory, but it's something along the lines of $4 million.
Correct.
That we pushed into capital because we have a lot of capital needs right now. And that makes sense for right now, but as far as a sustainable and predictable model is concerned, it doesn't fit what we were looking for when we adopted ratcheting and sliding in the first place. When I was still on this committee prior to coming onto council, we struggled with the same question. Where's the magic formula? What's the numbers? How do we explain them? How do we justify them? That kind of thing.
To the council member's point, it's my perspective that this tool isn't helpful unless we use it. And I think a lot of thought and effort, staff effort, council effort went into place to determine this range and to create this mechanism. But if we're just going to keep the budget at 16.7%, or the reserve within the budget at 16.7%, the mechanism's not doing any good. And so figuring out how to use that mechanism is really the heart of what my recommendation is getting at.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have anything. I don't have anything to say, you know, from a change perspective. It's certainly at the level of detail that you went into is great. I don't know if I'm smart enough to say anything either way. I mean, from what if I'm understanding it the way you were kind of just verbalizing it, it seems to make sense.
Well, and if I could write it in a way that's easier to understand, or, you know, I just kind of threw this on the page.
And I mean, and council can ask questions while we're there too. I mean, so if there's something not understood, so I don't think you'd necessarily have to do that, you know. And then on your change below, just to see if I understand it, replace the provision of operating revenues or expenditures, which is more predictable. You were saying like pick a specific month or something like that, right?
So
Just to be a bit more like
Yeah, so,
specific, I guess.
I think the recommendation is like, the way that we've been doing it from a practical perspective of just using operational revenue is fine. I think it's unnecessary to, and it's unnecessary to include or expenditures. I know that we pull that language just directly out of the GFOA recommendations. But since we're not doing that, and since it would create inconsistencies for us to suddenly switch over to calculating based off of expenditures, I think we may as well just remove that language out of there. But an alternative that we could base this on, and I think this is something that would certainly take a little bit more consideration, would be to base it off of, as we're putting the month, as we're putting the budget together, looking at the actual revenue that we have from the previous month as a reference point could be effective, although it wouldn't give as much context. It is a much more concrete number that we could potentially base this on.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me.
But
For a month or even an average, maybe, yeah.
To be honest, though, I'd be very open. I actually kind of like the idea of an average, but to be honest, I think there is something to be said for consistency, both in the year-to-year way that we calculate this reserve, and also just we calculate other things based off of revenue. So I think there's a pretty valid argument for just keeping it as revenue, which is essentially what we've been doing to calculate this reserve, and just my main objection is why have language in there that isn't applicable to our process.
Yeah.
I see it as a way of just clarifying our language in a way that is more friendly to constituents and easier to read, and gives more direct information to the public about what our actual process is, since we don't typically actually use expenditures as part of our calculations.
Yeah, that does seem to make sense. And potentially, I don't like, and it could be a bit out of place, but helpful and be more specific as new councils are installed, over time too, because it's like, well, then I have that kind of point of reference of, well, they've been doing it this way for, however long, if the verbiage was changed or something.
And that's certainly something that if our finance team has anything that they'd like to add, or critiques or concerns about that, I'm totally open to that. That part of this was more just like why do we still have that in here? And I know that's something too that in 2022 was discussed a lot, and then I think council members were, and you may be able to fill in on this. I know that taking the expenditure out of there was something that was discussed, and then there were so many bits and pieces to this whole reserve policy that I think that's something that didn't end up being edited out of the final adopted policy. But as I was listening back to those, I thought maybe if we're making a recommendation about this, we can just get that out of here at the same time.
I appreciate, Steve bringing this up, and didn't really understand it at first. And I don't know that we are using it as best as we could. I mean, so when do you ratchet it up to 21% that we need to reserve? And when do you ratchet it down to 12%? And I do like the fact that it would be based on revenues and not expenditures, but also it would control what expenditures we could make based on that. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, we have this discussion, is it revenues, is it expenditures? Revenues makes sense because like we had in the most recent financial update, we're seeing for the first time in my history in the city, revenues coming in slightly shorter than predicted for the year. And that signals a possible problem where we might have to dip into reserves for continuity of government, which is what they're intended for in the first place. Whereas expenditures, I mean, we have more direct control over those than we do over revenues, but that's more of a question of how fast you expand government and for what purpose.
And if you had a high number of expenditures in a month or even a couple months there because of, you know, a contract or something that was going through, and it's like all of a sudden in, you know, September and October, we had to, you know, we finally got approval or they finally came through, the third party came through, your expenditures could go way up, but it wasn't, I mean, it was, you know, yeah, that makes sense. You said it much more eloquently than I am, but I'm along the same
I
lines.
don't know about that.
Well,
I'm thinking through it out loud.
and part of it to me is, it's certainly important, right, when we are doing well as a community, right, to try and put away money into this reserve. But also, let's say that we did have something happen where we had to dip into the reserve. When do we start building back up that reserve, right? I think that's really important so that we don't dip into the reserve and never replenish it, right? And so trying to create better policies around, okay, we had to dip in, you know, 2 years ago, but now we're seeing our revenues are doing pretty well. Let's start slowly building back up this reserve so that we can be back to the place that we were before we had to dip into it, right?
That is the other challenge, I'll say, is that the sliding happens a lot faster than the ratcheting does.
Yeah.
So if we don't have a set pace for both of those things to happen, then we don't have a ton of guidance for how to guide through particularly challenging times when the 7 members of the body might be in disagreement over how important this is. So that would be, for me, I think one of the most helpful things is this is how fast we grow it, and this is how fast we're comfortable shrinking it before we have to look at the size of our government and decide what services we're going to cut.
And to that point, that's a big reason why I wanted to emphasize that fourth consideration, the relatively small adjustments allow for maximum consistency of budget, because, you know, we don't want to jump up from 21% down to 12% back up, because then suddenly we're gonna end up having to cut services while for totally unnecessary purposes.
Right, but I do think that the importance of this policy is that sometimes councils tend to be willing to spend a lot of money when it's coming in instead of putting it aside to save it for a rainy day. And so how do we get to that point? And I think that's where the policy probably needs to be defined.
And I mean, I'll attest to that. Just in the 3 years I've been in council, the general fund has expanded sizably, probably by somewhere in the neighborhood of 20%.
And I think in 2022, when this was being discussed by council, you know, the example of like, what did we do with the Cinderella City money came up a lot. And so that, I think that is all the more reason to create definition in these processes so that there's at least some guidance year to year and some consistency year to year as, you know, councils change, the members of this board change, and still providing consistent guidance.
Yeah, I'm good here. I don't have any. Thank you for going through it, because that helped a lot.
And again, if there's ways that we can reword this to convey some of that information, I'm all for that.
Do you have any other thoughts?
I was just wondering, you know, to the counselor's point about the sliding and the ratcheting, should we address like a recommended frequency or something like that? Would that be helpful?
I think the recommended frequency of adjustment is year to year, right?
Is it annually?
And what is the signal that we need to do it?
I think that would be based off of whatever measure we choose in the bottom, which could be annual revenue, or if we want to include like, you know, some sort of average monthly revenue consideration, like average actual monthly revenue, although that would certainly be influenced by the time of year that we tend to make these decisions, which may be worth considering as a reason not to do it that way, but I think we base it off of the relative difference between year to year in whatever measure that is, and or it could be, we could even base it over, we could consider it annually, but the measure could be based off of like a 3-year period, like a 3-year trend or something like that, that might give us a more concrete kind of idea of the trajectory of the economy. So
I think that would be more useful for some of my peers. And fund balance is typically what we look at. What's the bottom line? How much more money do we have than we actually need? And that might be the true measure of where we make moves. I don't know how you feel about that, Rita.
Well, I think it's probably good, but sometimes when we need the money, we use it, and so the actual fund balance may not be there because.
That is certainly an option. I mean, I would hate to leave Broadway unpaved because we want to leave money in the bank.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, we all need to make that decision appropriately, you know.
well, and I think not to get too bogged down, but I think like if I were actually like writing a proposal for this, right? I think I'd love to see language where we have an automatic adjustment in place, but the council can override that adjustment. So it's like, we adjust by 1.25% unless we don't have that range before the minimum or the maximum, or unless otherwise specified by council. I think it's like how I would, something along those lines is how I recommend to actually word it, where council doesn't necessarily, it's not something that like is required to be put on an agenda every year at a certain time, right? But should it not be practical, or should other expenses need to be made, council would have the ability to say, okay, this year we're at, even though that we would typically adjust this by 1.25, that's an arbitrary number made up, but whatever number we come to after staff helps develop a recommendation, then council could say, not this year because, and then, you know.
And that would achieve one of my goals, which is to ensure that the decision-making that we do here is very deliberate.
Yeah.
We're not just letting things happen and year to year kind of flying by the seat of our pants, depending on who's in charge.
I agree with that. Now, the question is, what happens? I mean, because there are situations that arise perhaps in a year that would change it dramatically.
Absolutely.
An event that could, and then do we have something to address the emergence?
Is that the override? I guess I was thinking that was the override, but maybe not. Or maybe we need to it would need to be specified that it is.
I mean, in the moment, we would pass a supplemental, but
Yeah.
we would have to do that with as much deliberation as we put the money in the bank in the first place. Obviously, we have a system that doesn't function if every year we're saying we're gonna put this much away, and then mid-year we're passing a supplemental, taking that money back again. We're wasting our time. It's performative and it doesn't do any good.
Yeah. Yeah.
While it's fresh of mind, I wanted to get that in here.
Yeah, your detail and thought on this is really, really impressive. I think maybe one of the more involved, at least a couple of years that we've been on topics, you know, into that level of detail.
I don't know, Bill, I feel like you leveled up as well with the appendix, the addition of an appendix this
Yeah, I
year.
got one digging into this stuff.
And to be fair, I think council did a lot of this work. It's just continuing the discussion and, you know, going back, listening to all those videos, meeting minutes and reading through those materials. I think this is something that the staff had done. This is something council had been considering. It was a lot to put on council's plate in 2022. So roping back in some of these considerations that council didn't really get to fully consider, or other things that may have been more pressing and it ended up getting more consideration, and some of this stuff about how to manage the bits and pieces, we can come back in and fill in some of those gaps.
Yeah. Right, anything else on this topic? Okay. I'll certainly go back through as you revise.
Please do.
Yeah. I know Peter had to drop. He did say, and I don't remember, so if everybody was here, I apologize, but he did say that he was going to, this was talked about at the council meeting, the Parks and Rec bond was talked about at length yesterday, so he actually wanted to listen to that, kind of go through it again, and then go back through and update that. So I know he's not going to highlight it, but I would just say probably as a committee, we'll let him make his updates, which is nice. It's great, you know, kind of real-time updates, and then we can chime in from there. But if anybody has any initial comments or thoughts on there, we can certainly tag them in it, you know, and add it on there for things to think about.
My only major comment is one of formatting, and it's not so much a preference of style as of consistency. I'm totally fine double spacing the beginning of each sentence, but I either want to do that throughout the entire thing or not do it at all. And same, just another minor gripe. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be like this, but I am. I prefer if we either refer to ourselves in first person or third person. I think we switch between the committee and we throughout the text, and if we could do one or the other, I would like that very much.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm a strong proponent of what I call the dispassionate third person. I don't like first person informal documents.
I agree. If we could replace anywhere where we refer to ourselves as we with the committee or the budget advisory committee or budget advisory committee, I'd feel more comfortable personally with that. But I didn't want to go through and start editing other people's section for admit something admittedly a little trivial.
I suspect that this was a Suzanne task past years. Did she go through the final report?
I don't know.
Now we know who to appoint to do it.
Sorry.
Well, let's just make a decision. So do we want to single space it? I think that's what I did.
Yeah, that's what I did also.
AP style guide, yes.
Yeah.
I thought I matched your format.
Okay, I think I did single spacing too. I usually do just in general, so that's why I'm saying that.
Yeah, because I went and like looked at other people's sections, font and size and all that to make sure it was matching. And in my section anyway, there are no first person pronouns, so I'm compliant.
I love it. So you were saying, and I don't know what I did, knowing me, I probably went back and forth. So we're just gonna say the committee or at the back or?
Yep, just anything other than we. The committee, committee members, BAC, I'm fine with any of those. I think we could even use those kinds of terms interchangeably. It's just I don't want to jump from third to first person. Sorry. Can I add one more minor thing?
Mhm.
Can we capitalize committee
Oh, yeah.
or the C committee? Thank you.
I'm also compliant with that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll double check mine because I know I'm not always great about that, so. Okay. And we can update that through the proof too. Try to call it.
Spent too long editing materials for state and local agencies for my brain to work correctly.
All right, so Parks and Rec will wait for the updates. Okay, anything in, I know we talked about what we're gonna add with, a second or another section for the audit. Any highlights or anything you wanna talk about for our sales and use tax?
I'd love to get feedback. I cut and pasted this graphic from the City of Englewood website. I don't really know if it's worthwhile to include it quite as it is. Like, I don't know whether the public in this context really needs to know, or it's helpful to have the way that the rates changed at the beginning of the 2023 year. But I did want to include something to the effect of, like, the reason why this says that the City of Englewood sales tax is 3.8% and your receipt says that your sales tax is a different number is because you're also paying all these other sales taxes. And I think some sort of visual illustration, whether it is this copy and pasted one that I got from the website, or something to a similar effect with a breakout of the relative amounts for these different special districts in the county and the state, I think would be helpful. But I'm perfectly happy replacing this with another graphic. Also, again, any feedback on the highlighted portion would be appreciated. I also would love feedback now that we are having that second section, specifically around the portions of the sales and use tax that we did the review on. I think, like, some of this commentary is specifically kind of directed toward that review. And I'd love the feedback from other committee members on, one, the recommendations themselves, and two, whether it's more appropriate to have them in this section or in that new section, whether that new section should be focused more on process. I think most of the recommendation is just stuff that I think we'd already asked of municipal staff, just to break out some of this additional information both in the presentations and in that form that we had, is really the heart of what I'm getting at in that first paragraph. The second paragraph is more just about in the cases where city council may be considering bringing to the public a new sales tax increase, which I emphasize is not something that the city has done regularly at all. And I emphasize in the background, right, that this sales and use tax increase for the road and bridge and public works and the alternative leasing was the first time in 34 years. But the last section, I communicate that when the council is considering sales and use tax increases in the future, to consider alternative funding forms, and that sales taxes are a relatively regressive form of taxation. So
I think the table, as you have it displayed, is perfect. I think it's very straightforward, easy to read, and I concur that the regular citizen looks at what is my total tax. And yes, we do need to highlight what portion of that is Inglewood, but people don't look at it as what am I paying in Inglewood? It's really what's the bottom line. So I think that's really well done that way.
The staff that made it.
I think that first paragraph that you have highlighted there could form the basis for that pull-out section about our review, because you definitely are already going toward that. I think the one comment I would have, and this is my opinion, on the second paragraph there, and it was something that I was really struck by. I think it's been a little bit over a year ago now, and I think it was maybe the Director of Public Works. And he was talking about what Inglewood's population is versus what our daytime population is. And it's quite striking, the difference. I think he quoted something like from 35,000 to a population of 50,000 during the daytime. And as we continue to look at development of the wellness district, for instance, or perhaps redevelopment of, connecting downtown to city center here or whatever, I think we will continue to be a city that sees a pretty big difference between people who are shopping here, spending here during the daytime. And so that's one of the reasons I do think looking at sales tax can be helpful. And that was one of the reasons, and again, personal opinion, when we voted on the ballot measure for roads, I know that probably the folks, there's probably at least, like, let's take Broadway, for instance. I don't have the exact data, but I would estimate that probably half the users of Broadway are not Inglewood citizens.
Oh, certainly.
And so they're pitching in to some extent when they shop in Inglewood to help sustain the infrastructure that we put in place to help them be on their way or come and work here, or whatever that looks like.
And I will say, I probably should have emphasized this a moment ago. This may have been influenced just by me going back through and listening to all of the council discussions about the reserve, but I did really strongly emphasize that sales tax is something that in times of economic distress does tend to fluctuate more. And so one of the considerations that I posed as a potential recommendation for this committee is to consider things like property tax, just for the sake of, if we're in time of economic downturn, property tax is a little bit more consistent. But to your point, right, one of the reasons why our community is so reliant on sales tax relative to surrounding communities is because we do have a relatively small population, despite having a pretty significant number of people that are coming and making purchases within the city limits. I certainly agree that we certainly want to do what we can to take advantage of that being the current state of our community, and not putting too much burden on our residents, while also recognizing too, were we in a time of economic downturn, what is an advantage could also lead to some instability in that specific scenario, right?
Yeah, I feel the same way you do about, how you stated about the sales tax. I mean, I definitely, I agree with the perspective that, it can adversely impact some folks, for sure. I do feel like, and I know last year we touched on different ways of funding. I think that was Peter's, wasn't it? Or if it was you. But in any case, I know we did talk about that. I do feel like council and staff have done a pretty good job at, I think based on the sales and use tax, the bond measure that's currently being discussed, have way different options. Where I agree with property taxes, I think if this had been saying we're going to increase property taxes, I don't think it ever would have passed.
Sure.
And I think that's, again, that depends on the economic situation too. But I don't feel like citizens would have passed that. And I think that's what will be interesting to see what happens with the Parks and Rec bond. So I don't disagree with making, kind of re-emphasizing that council look at different options. The information is correct. I just, I just want to be mindful from a committee perspective. I don't know if I completely agree that, like, we shouldn't have gone the sales and use tax, like I don't want
And
to
that-
revisit that,
And
you know?
that's not, if that's the way that it comes off, that's certainly not what I was trying to
Yeah.
communicate. It's more just, I was trying to communicate, in future
Yeah.
cases, right? We want to make sure that we don't become over reliant on sales taxes. But I think if that's one, the way that this comes off, certainly that's not what I'm trying to communicate. And two, if that's not a position held, that we should like put maybe more emphasis on not even just property taxes, right? But property taxes are, of course, like sales tax and property taxes are for anybody really the two big ones, unless you
Yeah,
have like
I
fees.
totally
And then,
agree,
like
yeah.
some places have like other relatively, we don't really have the other types of taxation that some municipalities can further rely on. But, for us, it's really just sales tax, property taxes, and fees. So if it's not if we don't want to emphasize property taxes, I'm okay with removing this part of the recommendation. I do think if I am okay with having I'm also okay with having the sales and use tax section be mostly just background and not really including specific recommendations in this section and moving the other recommendations to the other section. Or if there are maybe some revised recommendations that we did want to make as a committee, I love any suggestions for what to include there as well.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I mean, I don't disagree with what you have there. I think it maybe, it did come across a little bit like we were revisiting it, at least it did to me. But I mean, from my perspective, if we're saying from the committee that just kind of re-emphasize that, hey, we consider all options to us, when we're looking for funding, then I think that's good.
Well, and I by no means meant to critique the sales tax like that.
Yeah. Like I said, it did come across a little bit to me. I mean, I believe you. I don't,
Yeah.
I just, that's my stance, is that we just re-emphasize that, we just look at all options, in front of us, depending on the economic situation, political, all the factors that go into it.
And again, I was definitely like in the mindset of like, I did the reserve section research first, so I was like in the mindset of like economic hardship, and I'm like, I think like if you compare the city of Englewood to most localities surrounding us, we do a really high relative percentage of our revenues come from sales tax, and again, a lot of that's because of our population relative to the ratio of businesses that we have within the community, right?
Yeah.
But there is certainly in my mind some value, right, or some concern maybe around like over reliance in sales tax during times of economic hardship.
Yeah.
I mean, would you be comfortable if we added like, say, one line that kind of was kind of a pro-con model almost, where, talking about the fact that it can be unstable along with economic fluctuations, it can be regressive, but then maybe the pro being that due to the volume of commuters, of shoppers, et cetera, in Inglewood, that's kind of the upside to the sales and use, that we are capturing additional resources from non-residents who are in many ways using our services.
Not only would I be comfortable with that, I think that's probably kind of a glaring omission, and I think it probably should have been included in the first place. But beyond that, I'm certainly not opposed to us removing this section entirely, or that paragraph entirely, or adjusting it beyond just a sentence or two. But yeah, I think
I like you.
Yeah, because I think you start out, with a statement that recognizes the diligence of the city in kind of limiting the growth of that and kind of the responsible approach that has been taken to date. So I think having kind of a pro-con statement is really consistent with that.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't think there's any need to remove that, and I didn't get that sense quite that it was revisiting anything.
I actually like the inclusion of both and the balance, because the danger is trying to get rid of sales and use tax altogether. When Cinderella City was here, the entire city was, you know, boom because of Cinderella City.
Yeah,
And then, yeah, so I like the balance.
Good. And I don't know if I said it, but I agree with the chart as well. I think it's great because I think the more you can reemphasize that type of stuff, I think is really good.
I think it'll be great because when the county comes out and wants to raise taxes, then that little figure will probably skyrocket.
Because that's coming up.
Yeah, it is.
You know, so yeah, I agree. I think that was really good inclusion.
I will admit it, and will also admit, I was thinking about the Arapahoe County presentation, and I'm like, you know, next year if we want to include the same graphic, we could show.
Exactly.
And it might be, that's a good point. It might be worthwhile to do that, you know. Okay, the traffic planning, it's you and.
That was mostly Peter. I was a secondary role in that, but
I think we could probably, since Peter's gone, if we have kind of review it offline and tag them in any questions or comments. Be good. And he said he looks like he's still kind of working on it too. Peter to continue to modify ag specifics for the city. But from glancing through it, I mean, from topics that came up and, you know, what we talked about last month, I think, you know, he's hitting on them, so. So I think we can just kind of add comments on there. Are you good with that? Yeah. Okay. For mine, I highlighted a few areas where, and one of the things I said in here was that it's not that city or staff are not doing these things. If anything, I think I've heard that they are. Through the SIP meetings and kind of follow-up questions and just general discussion. And I actually had, you know, earlier on there, I think after the IT presentation, I had coffee with Joe Eisenhart. We had talked about some of this stuff because it's interesting to me just from being connected to the IT world. But my main focus was just like, hey, just, you know, we need to continue to make sure that the importance here and the impact to the city that if, you know, if an attack or, you know, did happen, you know, from a security, ransomware, or some other kind of, you know, cyber threat, it's just kind of to emphasize that, you know, but also acknowledging that, hey, you know, depending on the situation, we may need to make budgetary decisions, you know, but if we're cutting things out of, you know, what IT says we need, like, let's just do our due diligence, which again, I think we are, and it was just kind of reemphasizing that. And I think what I had heard earlier, because I remember talking to Director Eisenhart about this a bit, or it came up in one of the meetings, was I think staff has put in more processes and stuff to make sure that IT is included in project reviews or kind of that intake piece of it, just to make sure that IT is included and, you know, able to weigh in that, hey, this could impact us, and we're not going out to a third party just randomly to, you know, be sold and then, you know, come in and it's like, well, we can't really integrate with that, you know. And from what I understand, that's, you know, that's happening or, you know, continuing to improve, which was great to hear. Because in the, you know, in the corporate world, the same thing happens. You know, you have a team that goes out there and buys them, and then you're like, well, you can't support any of this. And then to the point of the, and if anybody, as they go through it deeper, please, you know, just add any comments if it doesn't make sense. And I'll be consistent on my convictions and stuff like that, on my grammar. I found these interesting. I'm sure there's a bunch more stuff out there, but grab some quotes and such of some of the, you know, some of this was actually coming from, I can't remember, I think it was, there was one city, I'm trying to remember, New Hampshire. But there was, it was talk of like attacks and things like that and what's happened in some of the other research. So I just found it kind of interesting. So I didn't want to bog that down in the actual meat of it, but I shared it there. And then recognition, I know the ones I called out. One just wanted to call out Suzanne. I think you kind of did that in the intro as well. Like Suzanne was, because especially for as long as she was on the committee. And then Jenny and the finance team, you guys did a ton of work on the template to use for SIP and all that. And I think it helped the discussions. And then it looks like folks threw in a few other items.
Yeah, I added a few others just following what you had written on that first page, I think, to add them in. I wanted to thank all of the. I think in a few sections you broke it out, but I wanted to really explicitly thank staff and different folks that have been really receptive to a lot of our requests and questions. I very much appreciate everything they've contributed and wanted to be explicit about my things in regards for their work here.
Yep, I feel like it's been a really good year. We've had some new stuff, and there's the last several months between the audit and the SIP and everything, there's a wallet, and then this, there's been a lot that the committee's gone through. Where the first part of the year was kind of more listening and learning, and now we've gone to action, and I think everybody's done a really good job. So it looks like we need a conclusion. I think Jay was going to do well. Jay wasn't here last time either, so I think we assigned it to him, but.
So I emailed him,
Okay.
and I sent him my conclusion from the year before in case he wanted, it would save him some time, but I didn't hear back from him. So, I mean, if he's not available, I'm happy to do a conclusion.
Yeah.
Again, templated off what I did last year, but updating it with the meat of this report. But I don't want to, duplicate effort if Jay's already on it.
Yeah, maybe I can follow up as well and see if he's, I haven't heard. I know last month something came up. It seemed like he said he wasn't going to attend last month, kind of last minute or traveling or something, but I'm kind of surprised we didn't hear from him this week. So I know he's had a lot going on, so a lot of personal stuff. So.
And he may have also just been waiting for everyone else to get their sections in. I know that's what I did last year. It's kind of hard to write a conclusion until you know what's in the story.
Yeah, that's true. I can try to check in with him too to see if I get a response too.
Well, let me know. I'm happy to jump in if we need to get that.
Okay.
And please edit at will.
Yeah,
I have
same with me.
no pride and ownership over my writings.
Yeah, same here. All right, so I think that takes us through it. So we need to send Jenny the final copy Monday. So I'd say by, Saturday night, Sunday morning, let's try to wrap it up, and I'll send off, I'll include Peter, of course. And then Jenny always sends out to the whole group in the final version, so. But if everybody can make their edits by then, we'll be good. I'll go back through and do reviews and such. Any other comments on this? All right, well, thank you, everybody. I think we're down to members' choice, right?
I think so.
So next month's meeting was the schedule, and I know you had talked about, like, do we need a specific meeting for that? The only other thought I had, and I was thinking of it earlier today, was if we didn't do a specific meeting for it, which I don't know from a bylaws perspective if that's okay, but would be to try to do it, through email or something like that. Through a schedule. I don't know if that would be okay, or if we should just plan to at least check in August.
Again, you run the risk of an open meeting if you have more than 3 people.
Could we do something more along the lines of like, Peter's not here, but our chair, our new vice chair, sending sending out a proposed schedule, maybe to you, and then that could be something that we could discuss at a different meeting, and we could approve it, or specific concerns could be maybe sent to you if you're comfortable with that. Although I think really, if we have a proposed schedule put together by our chair or vice chair, then we could just address that at our next meeting rather than putting more work on staff's plate or on your plate specifically.
Yeah.
Well, I think typically staff they provide the proposed schedule just based on, staffs and their timing of their budgets and discussions, and then just availability. And then we kind of chime in to see if we, agree or disagree. We usually don't propose a schedule. We may say, hey, can we do this or that, or we want an extra session or not, I think is generally where our feedback has come in. I think overall, the committee really hasn't cared what order things are in from this, we're happy staff takes the time, so we're not too particular on the order of it.
I think the one feedback that we had this year was, since we're doing this additional review around public works and around alternate policing, just making sure that we have time to adequately consider that, and maybe hearing from those two, obviously not all just the police in general, in time to incorporate some of that perspective into our review, I think is the only real feedback since my time out on the council that I can recall as far as scheduling is concerned.
Yeah, I had raised that. I think timing of those two departments is really critical, especially so we would have that audited financial information that we could look at and that we're comparing kind of, a year at a time.
Yep, I agree with that.
And also, what you might want to consider too is the department's presentation outline, if you'd like to make any changes to that.
Yeah, I mean, I have no issue with attending the August meeting, but I don't come up, and trying to be aware of everybody's time. That's why I wanted to bring it up.
And Jenny, this year, didn't we have like the police department, I know for sure, came twice, right? Because they had their own presentation where they were top of agenda, and then they came back specifically to report on the sales and use numbers. And I'm wondering, in terms of efficiency and staff time, could the police not, for instance, do both in one of our meetings, and city or public works likewise?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of part of what I think we discussed, Shane.
That might make more sense to have them meet in the, March, April timeline.
Yeah.
Certainly don't want to put too much crunch on those departments, but I think overall it would be a net savings for everyone if we could do it that way.
Chief can go out and do some alternate policing with that extra time.
That's right.
So I guess, are we still okay with doing August? I mean,
So is it prohibitive to try to invite a presentation for our August meeting?
I think it was more just the scheduling of it because everybody's working on their budgets.
Okay.
I mean, I'm fine. I think that was the main thing, was it's just a weird timing.
Yeah, it's the timing. They'll only have really the first 7 months of 2024 to review. So, I mean, we could probably ask of the smaller department, but it's not really giving them too much time.
What if we just did like a remote meeting for our August meeting? That way we don't run into any issues on the open meetings rule, but, people don't have to physically be present here. If we're just agenda setting, I don't know.
Yeah. I think I would say if you want to join remote, then that's fine. But I think you guys have to be here no matter what, right?
I mean, we're here.
You facilitate it, so.
Yeah, because you just never know if somebody from the public might
Yeah,
want
that's
to attend
true
in
too.
person.
Yeah. So it's certainly, where all these preferences always to be in person. I think it's certainly a good meeting to be remote. That's not going to be agenda heavy. So, okay.
I think that sounds good to me. Do we,
I'll be here.
Is there, I was gonna ask, is there a certain number of members that we need to have in person?
Need 3, all, either virtual or in person.
Oh, yeah, but like, it doesn't,
That's the form, yeah.
but there's no rule around quorum around number of butts and seats, it just, beautiful.
Right. But we can't have like a 3-way email exchange.
Right. Of course, yeah.
Anything from a member's choice perspective, anybody has to bring up?
I do.
Yeah.
And it's about you, so it's good. I think you'd be remiss not to take an opportunity to thank Bill for his service as chair of the committee. And I just want to say I've been so impressed by your stable, measured leadership. But more than that, I like the personal touches that you brought to your role. And I want to share with some of you, and I hope it's okay, but there were a couple times where Bill reached out personally to me, and I really appreciated that. And you said, I hope you felt like that meeting went okay, or were you okay with kind of how we ended that? And then there was a time when I was considering not continuing service on the committee. And I remember you sending me a really nice message as I was out traveling somewhere saying that, I really appreciate that you still connect remotely and you really participate, and I hope that you'll consider staying on. So I just want to thank you for that. You've been a great chair of our committee, and although I'm sad you're not continuing in that role, I'm grateful that you're going to continue on this committee.
Well, thank you, that's very nice of you to say.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, I've enjoyed working with you all.
I'll say, just to add on to that, as a relatively new member, I'm a very new member. It was pretty unnerving, and you were so kind and so welcoming. I mean, really, truly, everybody has been, council members included, staff included. But really, I appreciate that, and yeah.
Well, thank you guys, I appreciate that. It's been good. I was a little unsure about it coming into it when Josh was leaving, but it worked out good.
You're a natural.
All right, well, I think anything else, member's choice? All right, then I think we're adjourned. Thank you all. Minutes over, but not too bad.
I think that's one of your highlights, is you always had us early.